A new series has arrived on Paramount Plus, which doesn't have as much content as Netflix or as much of a dedicated fanbase as Disney Plus. This series is based on the Halo video game series, but only based off of a handful of elements. This doesn't necessarily mean that the story is bad. But is it worth your time? Well, let's see what the merits of the series are before I go into the not-so-great part. One of the better parts is that people who know nothing about Halo, myself included, can still enjoy the series. However, the same can be said about Halo Forward Unto Dawn. So this show isn't unique in this respect. Sure, there are aspects of the story that I'm not familiar with, but the main story isn't completely reliant on information that a non-Halo fan isn't privy to. Alright, now that we've gotten that out of the way, the reasons it might not be worth your time. Speaking of time, take a guess as to how long it took to produce this series. Star Wars: A New Hope, made all the way back in the 1970s, took roughly 4 years to make. This was an old sci-fi film, and since that time newer tools to help produce modern films and series are more available than ever. WandaVision, a more recently produced series on Disney Plus, took roughly 3 years to make. So how long did this Halo series take? Since its announcement back in 2013, it took 9 years. It was initially planned to be released sometime in 2015. Turns out they were off, by half a decade or so. And yet, despite all of this time, it hasn't blown critics or audiences away. All of these 9 years added up to a meh. Additionally, there has been a bit of a disconnect between the series and the source material. Back in 2018, Showtime's president of programming, Gary Levine, made comments which indicated that this game would respect the canon, and that Master Chief would be a lead character. There's a few possibilities to keep in mind, since these statements can be interpreted in a variety of ways. One possibility is that there was a major rewrite of the original plot. This is something which I'm not really opposed to. Most of the writing process, regardless of whether you're writing for a book or filming a series, is telling a story, then revising it so it looks like you knew what you were doing the whole time. Most of the writing process, regardless of whether you're writing for a book or filming a series, is telling a story, then revising it so it looks like you knew what you were doing the whole time. They might have written themselves into a corner a few times, and needed to rewrite this story several times over. Or there were certain creative restrictions placed upon the storytellers. Another possibility is that these comments are deceptive in nature. What I mean by this is that these statements can lead the reader to false conclusions. For example, stating that Master Chief is a lead character can give viewers a false impression that he is the main character. Plot spoiler, he isn't. Additionally, you might think that this series won't introduce contradictions with the source material of Halo. This is technically correct, but not because they'll make a film with the source material in mind. It's correct because they slapped an alternate timeline label so they could keep superficial elements, Spartans, the Covenant, etc., but not have to worry about telling stories which directly contradict with what we know about the world of Halo. Now, what about this pesky alternate timeline? Some people use it to criticize the story, and others use the alternate timeline label to defend it. Well, I would suggest that an alternate timeline doesn't inherently change the quality of a story. You can still have good characters, a functioning plot, and minimal plot holes in a story that deviates from what is considered canon. However, that doesn't mean the writers are going to get out of this scot-free. Since this is an alternate timeline, the writers now have less excuses for poor writing, if this entire series turns out to be not so great. If they were having difficulty telling a fresh and brand new Halo story while keeping consistent with all the lore the series has to offer, then I would understand if there were slip-ups, mistakes, or intentional decisions which contradict the more obscure aspects of the source material. However, since they have an alternate timeline, they cannot rely upon the burden of canon consistency as an excuse if the series does poorly. Before we wrap things up, we have a not-so-important segment of the video. My thoughts. And the first thought that comes to mind is this. I can't personally speak about the quality of the series, since I haven't seen it. The best I can do is deliver secondhand reports, reviews others have left, and news articles. And if I've messed up, whether with this video script or any other work that I produce, feel free to leave your feedback. YouTube deleted dislikes, but they haven't deleted the comments section yet. Now, back to the original question, is it worth your time? Well, if you've got an excess of free time on your hands, maybe. However, I would suggest waiting until the entire season is over before giving each episode a look back to back. This way you can experience the story without interruption, and if you're looking to critique the series, scenes from the previous episodes will be fresh on your mind. In the meantime, I would highly suggest that you watch Halo Forward Unto Dawn. It's a great series to compare this new one to.